Let's get to our main topic, Doctor Who Season 22, a deep dive.
Yes, let's get into it, Dave.
So, 2 points I want to make right from the start. One personal and one professional is the wrong word, but analytical, if you like. The personal is, this is actually, and I didn't really realise this until I was thinking about it, this is the first season of Doctor Who I can actually remember going out properly. There are seasons in the Davo era, well, more stories in the Davo era, really, like Mordred Undead or The Awakening or Planet of Fire. I can remember images. I can remember moments as a kid, you know, like the malice in the TARDIS or the malice coming out of the church wall and other things. I can remember that, but I couldn't remember actually watching the story. Whereas by season 22, I was just old enough to know that Doctor Who was a show I liked, to be growing as a fan at the age of sort of about 5 or 6, probably close to 6 by the time it got out here. And I remember watching these stories. I can actually remember watching Attack of the Cybermen. I remember watching Vengeance on Varos. And indeed, I can remember because my dad and I had the Radio Times 20th Anniversary magazine, and the program guide in that only went as far as the Twin Dilemma. So we slotted a piece of paper into it, and every week we were going through and adding to the episode guide in this magazine.
Nice.
So, yeah, I actually do have some quite fond memories of this.
Before you go on, Dave, I'll just say my piece on how I sort of came to it.
Yeah.
I watched this piecemeal. I was getting into fandom in late 86. This had already gone out, and I hadn't sort of watched it religiously. I have memories of seeing the Davo era. I have memories of seeing the Colin era, but this first season of Colin, I didn't watch properly. I saw it piecemeal through videos with my local fan group. So I was sort of watching stories all in one hit. I wasn't seeing them when they were sort of going out the first time on Australian television. It wasn't until Trial of a Time Lord aired in Australia that I was religiously watching week to week.
Interesting. Okay, two very different approaches. So, having made the personal comment, the analytical comment I wanted to make is just giving you kind of my view of where this season sits in terms of the show and the production team, because obviously J&T has been the producer now since season 18, had more hits than misses, it's pretty fair to say, in the seasons he's done so far.
Oh, absolutely. You know, people, when they look back on his whole career now, they sort of see the ups and downs, but at this point he hadn't had too many downs. He'd had quite a few successes.
Yeah, very, very much so. For me, Eric Saywood had been appointed the script editor towards the end of season 19. Season 20 is literally just him sort of getting his feet under the desk and going, right, how do you script edit Doctor Who? Where am I going to get my authors from? How do I pull this together? We're doing something from every... Okay, blah, blah, blah. And just sort of getting a season out. Not a bad season, but it's very much just get this season out and I need to work out what I'm doing. With season 21, that's where Saywood is able to sit down and go, right, what is the story I want to tell in Doctor Who? What is this tone that I want to have in Doctor Who? What does my season of Doctor Who look like? And that's where you start to get stories like Warriors of the Deep, which, you know, for its production faults, is a very well-written, good story, in my opinion. You've got Frontios, well-written, exciting adventure. Resurrection of the Daleks, Planet of Fire, Caves of Bloody Androzani. You know, you get this season that's put together. Now, whether you like the tone or not, I don't think anyone can argue that season 21 doesn't have a very deliberate, structured tone that has been put together really well. And I think it is the peak of Eric Saywood, supported by J&T, who, you know, really knows what he's doing at this point and is putting it all together. You then get into season 22, new Doctor and everything. And the real feeling that I got watching this back for the podcast is this sense of a production team going, okay, everybody, we're going to give you what we know you love. Here you go. Why don't you used to like this? We're doing that trick you like. We're doing that thing you like. Why you should be loving this. You always used to. That's the real feeling I got here, that everything here logically should work. Some of it really does work. Some of it really doesn't. And I think it's, to get my Simpsons reference in for the episode, Rob.
Yes, please.
It's like the start of the Itchy, Scratchy and Poochie episode, where the Itchy and Scratchy production company's going, kids, you love this stuff. This is classic. This is everything that you love. And the kids going, well, yeah, we've seen it before.
Yeah.
No, it's not new anymore. But you love it. Like, that's kind of how this season feels to me. I think some of that is valid, some of it is not valid. And that's perhaps the thematic umbrella under which I'm going to be talking a bit about this season.
Yeah, look, all very fair comments, Dave. I'm going to jump in and say, with the casting of Colin Baker, I'm always in two worlds on Colin Baker. There are times where I really enjoy what he does, and there are other times I think your personality is too big, it's too panto, it's just not fitting on television, There's just something about it, and I watch it and I think, if Davo was doing that scene, it would be so different and it would probably work. And here it just feels like panto at times. But you know what? I do like several of the stories in this season.
Me too.
So, although I'm saying, I'm not sure if Colin's right, he's a 50-50 proposition for me, and sometimes it's like panto, and, there are still stories here that are really good. So I'll just say that up front as well, so before people think I'm just going to be bashing it as we go along.
Yeah, and there were Colin moments in this that I sort of saw for the first time in a long time and thought, hey, I get what he's doing there. That's kind of clever. That's kind of good. And there are other moments where you just sit there and go, ooh, you really are new at this, aren't you?
Oh, well, look, I kicked off this rewatch by actually watching Twin Dilemma as well, just to get me in the mood, as it were. And there were bits in that where I thought, I don't remember liking that part before, but actually Colin is being quite fun and likable, and he delivered that line in a really cheeky way, and I started seeing a different sort of performance to what I've seen in the past and what I've assumed I've seen in the past, if that makes any sense. And I actually saw some new things from him, and I thought, this isn't as bad as I thought.
And of course, we not that long ago, Rob, did our whole run through Jodie Whittaker's first season of The Doctor, and all the way through that we were saying it takes a year for a Doctor to really hit their strides and really know what their character's like. Okay, there are exceptions. Tom Baker does it from scene one, but Tom Baker's playing Tom Baker.
Yes.
He had a cheat there. Most Doctors aren't doing that, and that does take them time. And across this season, again, you really do feel Colin just trying different things, and there may be things that he was also going, ooh, I thought that'd be a good idea, but didn't quite work. And I think there must have been, because as you watch him go on in Trial of a Time Lord, a lot of those rough edges are smoothed out. So before we go any further, fan rep on this one, fair to say, I actually think has never been a particularly strong reputation.
That's very fair. I don't think fans have really held it up as a shining example of 80s Who. The fact the show got cancelled, essentially, after this, and only brought back at the behest of, fans and that god-awful single, I think that plays into it as well. People see this as the season that got Doctor Who axed, basically.
Yeah, and although Colin himself has had a bit of a renaissance with a number of fans, many of them say that's off the back of Big Finish rather than a new love for his era. So, again, it'll be interesting to see whether some of those fan views and fan rationales for that view do hold up.
Yeah, look, just to go back to Twin Dilemma, and I know that's not part of the stories we're going to be discussing, there's a scene in that where I think he's going to attack Asmael, and he runs across the room and jumps over a chair and says, "Villain!" And it is so cheesy and awful.
Yes.
And it's like, on Big Finish, of course, this never happens. So his Doctor comes across as, much better. But some of the stuff, some of the direction, some of the stuff he's given to do, it is woeful. It's not even good children's TV from the mid-'80s. It's not good at all.
And so that's an important jumping off point, I think, into the actual stories. Because the fan legend or the fan narrative is that you have Caves of Androzani, everybody thinks it's a wonderful story, big exit for the Doctor, for the Davison Doctor. You then watch Twin Dilemma and it was like, what just happened? That was terrible. Okay, look, we'll tune in for the first one of the next season to see, was that an aberration? They tune in for Attack of the Cybermen, they get more of the same, and the audience just switches off. That's kind of the fan narrative. If you look at the ratings, it doesn't really hold up. The ratings actually don't drop off a cliff at the end of Attack of the Cybermen Part 1. There's a decline and a shift and all the usual ratings ups and downs. But yeah, the fan reputation is that Attack of the Cybermen validated the concerns that people had out of Twin Dilemma. I'm going to say right from the bat, I don't think that's fair or correct or justified at all.
And I would completely agree with you on that. Absolutely.
I in fact, struggle to understand, having watched this back, having watched it a few times over the last couple of years, why Attack of the Cybermen has that reputation as the one that just killed Colin Stone dead at the start of the season. I think that it is because fans are a little bit aware that the continuity stuff is the weakest aspect and it's their fault that's in there. Mm-hmm. And there's a little bit of misdirected guilt, perhaps. But back to my opening point, this is a new Doctor being introduced with a classic monster, the Cybermen. Nicola's doing well. You get adventures in space and time. You get stuff in a quarry. The Cryons are a really weird, different take on an alien. They look kind of cool. The tombs look cool. Okay, they don't look like Tomb of the Cybermen, but who cares? And the TARDIS changes shape. And look, I don't care. When I was 6, that was the most exciting thing to happen in my year, with the possible exception of Halley's Comet actually visiting. The TARDIS changed shape, Rob.
I know, and I remember at the time being just outraged at the thought that they'd do this. I saw it as sacrilege, but now I see it as quite a fun, quirky thing. You know, I don't mind that aspect at all. And the fact, yes, they're on Telos and so on. And if I have one criticism of it now as an older fan who has seen Tomb of the Cybermen, which, correct me if I'm wrong, did that even exist at the time this went out?
No,
it was still a lost story, wasn't it?
Yeah, it lost for another 7 years, I think.
Yeah, okay, so like people hadn't seen that story. Now looking back as an older fan who's seen Tomb of the Cybermen, I kind of think, oh gosh, wouldn't it have been nice if they had made the set a bit more retro? Could they have not got that 60s Cyberman logo and put that somewhere? You know, could they have not done more with the way it looked? That would have been amazing. But, you know, putting that aside, all the early stuff and the creeping around the sewers and the return of Lytton and, you know, I think it's all quite good. And people do, you know, almost dumb it down to, oh, it's just very violent and Cybermen have their heads knocked off and they're shot through the mouthpiece and Lytton's hands are crushed and all that sort of stuff. And I've got to say, as a kid, I don't know about you, Dave, but as a kid, I grew up with sci-fi stories and, you know, nasty horror movies and stuff, and I was quite okay with all of this kind of thing. And even as I got a bit older, like 12, 13, 14, 15, I would think to myself, well, you know, if the Cybermen did catch you, you know, they would cybernize you or they would crush your hands. This is what would happen. You know, you wouldn't just sort of say some quips and run away and everything would be okay. That's more unrealistic than actually someone getting their hands crushed. So I never quite had a problem with this. I don't have a problem with a lot of quotation marks gun Doctor Who. You know, then again, we'll discuss Mind Warp at some stage in the future, and I'll have quite a few bad things to say about it. So it's not like a blanket sort of thing for me, but this season, I don't mind the violence so much. I don't mind the acid baths. I don't mind the Cybermen's heads being knocked off. It's all good to me. But that's kind of because that's the kind of kid I was and the kind of stuff I was watching.
I certainly have some thoughts on the violence in this story and others that I want to come back to as a bit of a bunch later on in our chat.
Okay.
I certainly agree with all the points you made about this story. I think it is a good adventure. I think the characters are very good characters. Even some of the minor ones are very entertaining and well-played characters. I think that's a good thing. I do see the fault in it. It does look a little bit cheaper than Doctor Who has in the past. Mm-hmm. That's nothing to crucify a story for, but it does show. I think that there are plot threads that do kind of go nowhere, like the whole trying to capture the alternative time machine. It's kind of like, well, why? And where did it come from? And what is it? And oh, they've just been shot. Okay, like that doesn't hold together that well. And there are decisions that are made very, very clearly to try and satisfy fans that don't come off. And probably the real sort of epitome of that is the casting of Michael Kilgareth as the Cyber Controller. J&T clearly expects fans to go, oh my god, you went and got the guy from 1968 and you got him to play the same character again. That's so good of you. You really care. Your attention to detail, John, wonderful. Whereas instead they've gone...
Who's this fat bloke?
Yeah. If he wasn't Michael Kilgariff, would you ever have cast him in this role? Yeah. And the answer is no.
But it makes you think, doesn't it? Because I just said a moment ago, isn't it great to be back on Tellus, but they could have done it retro. So they have this attention to detail to get this specific actor to play this specific role, but they don't make the tombs look more retro and more like Tomb of the Cybermen. I find that just bizarre.
Yeah, it's interesting where the messages came through and where they didn't. And I think it's probably a reflection on where J&T had a more direct decision-making process. You know, he signed off casting, whereas perhaps he didn't have quite the same control over the designer. And if this was modern Doctor Who, particularly Russell T Davies era Doctor Who, where they'd have their famous tone meetings, that probably would have all been rounded out a bit more.
Agree.
But look, a imperfect, but I think mostly positive, fun adventure to start off with.
Are you going to score these out of 10 as we go along?
I hadn't been planning to, but I can.
Could you? Because I would give this a 6.5 out of 10.
I would go a 7.
Okay, fair.
It's there's room for improvement, but yeah, it's definitely well and truly above a pass.
Yeah, it is for me too.
Like if I'm calling 5 a pass, this is beyond that, well and truly.
Okay, 6.5 for me, 7 for you. Let's move on to Vengeance on Varos.
So a broader point that I wanted to use Vengeance on Varos to explore. One of the things that really comes through with Eric Saywood's work for the show is he's a very big believer in stories must happen in a world. You can't just arrive on, Planet X and have generic things happening without any sort of context, without any sort of zeitgeist. You actually have to create a world, and who is in charge of the world, and what's the feeling of this world? How does this world work? And you see this through his work very, very strongly in season 21. You know exactly how the sea base works, how it fits into the bigger world. You know how Frontios works. You know how that works, how it's controlled, how people interact with each other, their philosophies. Androzani, Major and Minor, same sort of thing. And you see that again, I think, in this season, particularly in Varos, where he said to Philip Martin, go and create a world and then put the story in it. That, I think, is a really good thing. I think it's one of the strengths of Eric Saywood's work. And where normally I would say Andrew Cartmell beats Eric Saywood on a lot of things, on this I think Eric Saywood is ahead of Andrew Cartmell, who's like, it's going to be in a space refrigeration shop. Why? Who cares? Just let's go with it.
Yeah.
I'm not knocking Cartmell for that. Like, that's a cool, fun way to do storytelling. Like, it's perfectly cool. But Eric Saywood does sit there and go, right, you have a planet. What's the history of this planet? Oh, it's a penal colony that's devolved. Okay. How is it governed? What's their, how's their economy work? How's their justice system work? And so when you've worked out all that and then put a story in, I think it's really effective. And I think that's why this really is a contender for the story of the season. And I've got to say, when I was a fan in the late 80s, early 90s, this is the one that was very much seen as, if there's a classic in season 22, it's Varos.
Yeah, agree. Although I've got to say, as a younger viewer, I was not entirely on board with that at the time. I kind of found this one a bit boring when I was younger, but as I got older, I thought, oh no, my God, what was I thinking? This is actually really, really good. There are bits in it that are a bit cheesy. There are bits in it that I would love to have seen done better, either, in terms of the acting or the direction. But the actual concept, oh my God, this is great.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I kind of really got it as a 6-year-old, and the subtleties and the complexities certainly passed me over, but I understood this idea of they get to vote, and if they vote no, he dies, and they voted yes, so he gets to live a little, like I got all that, and I understood it. I didn't really get the whole, it was a send-up of video nasties and everything like that, but it was a good adventure, and I enjoyed the Greek chorus as well. So I have fond memories of this, and I've always had no, that's the wrong word. I've always had a strong regard for Vengeance on Varos.
Okay, well, that's good. You know, for the majority of my life, I have enjoyed it. We're only talking about when I was quite young. By the time I was in my mid to late teens, I was like, oh, yeah, okay, I get it now. You know.
So coming back to it, Rob?
Look, I'm always a bit disappointed by studio-bound stories in the 80s. I always feel they feel a bit small and cheap, and then, you know, that it detracts from the story in some ways. But this one, coming back to it now, I like the concepts. I'll say again, I mentioned the acid bath earlier when I was talking about violence in Who. I don't mind that scene at all. I don't even see the Doctor as necessarily, you know, killing those two guys. I think, fine. I think this is tough sci-fi. Again, it's gun sci-fi, and I'm okay with gun sci-fi. I know a lot of people who recoil from the thought of it. I don't have a problem with it.
I certainly understand what you're saying about it looking like it's been made in a small 80s studio, and there are very obvious moments where it's clear they've got 4 foot of corridor and that's it.
Yeah, I mean, you know, but even in the McCoy era, saying the Happiness Patrol feels similar to this to me.
Absolutely. It's certainly not Robinson Crusoe on that.
No.
Again, I think the characters are all very well written. The security chief, Quillam, the governor, I mean, played by Martin Jarvis very well. I don't think all of them are as well acted as they could be, and in fact, I think the acting is a problem in this story.
Mm.
But we've got to mention as well, this story does give us probably the one iconic image or monster out of the Colin Baker era, and arguably out of most of J&T's time as producer in Syl.
Yeah, look, that's very fair. I mean, to skip ahead in this season, I think the design of the Borat is amazing. But in terms of what people remember, and it does help that he's brought back again in the next season as well, of course. But as a new original character who people remember, who comes back twice, hard to argue with that, Dave.
Yeah, and I did enjoy his performance again. And in fact, I think my enjoyment of Nabil Shaban's performance as Syl does improve as I get older, and I do appreciate some of the subtleties in it and some of the quibs and some of the asides. I think it's actually quite a deep performance. It's a shame about his blackguards. We'll just sort of cringe and move on.
Well, in some ways, it's a shame that it was like, oh, J&T will cast for diversity, and what do they do when they get this disabled chap in? They make him a monster. It's like, oh no, I'm not sure that was what you were meant to do.
Yeah, I'm kind of okay with this long word, because I don't want to sound like I'm saying that they should be playing a monster, but I think that it's a cool part and it's a leading part, and you know, I don't have a problem. He's an actor. Actors play monsters sometimes. I'm pretty relaxed about that, really. First time though in this season where we can explore the criticism that the Doctor doesn't solve the plot, because what actually solves the plot is Syl gets an email from his boss saying pay any price, at which the governor's like, any price you say, huh? What about 17 units? Like, not 500 units. It's like, 17, I'm really going to push the boat out. Yeah, good on you. But the Doctor, like, other than reading out the email to Syl, the Doctor doesn't actually solve that problem, nor does he bring down a regime overnight. The regime is in place when the Doctor leaves.
Yeah, it is. It's very different in comparison to Doctor Who stories of the past, where he would absolutely have brought it down and, you know, been shaking hands with, you know, the people who are going to take over the planet at the end of the story and all that sort of stuff. So, but I mean, that's noteworthy, and maybe that's commendable in some ways.
It's something that if we were to be doing just this story, we could explore in a lot of depth. As a liberal, I do find myself concerned by the idea that the Doctor found a dysfunctional but democratic process of leadership and replaced it with a non-democratic, frankly, autocratic form of leadership. Now, we're not supposed to care because Martin Jarvis is meant to be a good guy. There's not a lot in the story that really supports him being a particularly good guy. He's just not as nasty as some others. And, I don't think the ending quite works if you want to really get analytical about it, but the adventure does.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess at the end, after the Doctor's gone, he does, issue that message that things are going to change. So maybe that's why he's a good guy, because he sort of did that in the end?
Yes, I will believe that when the governor issues writs for genuine popular elections and representative democracy and all that sort of thing, and I'm not sure that that's what he's about to do.
Right, okay. So, Dave, before we move on to Mark of the Rani, what would you score Vengeance on Varos?
I'm going to give it an 8.5.
Oh, that's very high. I think I can only go as high as a 7.5.
Okay, still a step up though.
Oh yeah, it's a step up from Attack, and it's a reasonable score. I have no problems with the story. I think it's a pretty good one.
I do have problems with the next story.
Okay.
Which is, of course, Mark of the Rani.
Yes.
I think it's a mess. I think it's boring. And I think it's terribly acted by almost all of the cast. This, probably more than any other story, probably even more than the one that's coming next, epitomises that view of, we're giving you everything that you love. Why don't you enjoy this? We're giving you the Master back. We're giving you an historical. We've got this cool time lady with an extra TARDIS. And there's a dinosaur at the end. Why don't you love this? And some fans do love this, but I just go, yes, but why are you doing any of it? What's the reason for it? The Rani, okay, she kind of makes sense. Doesn't really end up where Pip and Jane Baker really intended her to, but she works, I guess. I think her performance here is a little bit arch, and it's fabulous, but it's a little bit like, ooh, okay. The Master is just totally redundant and is a bit of a thickie. Most of the supporting cast cannot act, or just are completely bemused about what the hell they're doing. Now, I don't know the actor's name, but the guy that would go on and be the father in the big Pride and Prejudice adaptation, who's the main character in this, he's just walking around the set going, I don't know what's going on, and I can't hide it.
Yeah, look, I know people who absolutely love this story, and visually, because they're out on location, as I've said on many episodes of this podcast, Dave, I love it when they're out on location. It just adds that little bit extra. But even that can't save this. It's just a whole bunch of ingredients thrown into a pot but not stirred up and not cooked and then just tipped onto a plate. The ingredients are there. It just hasn't become anything,
That's a really good way of putting it, Rob. I really agree with that. To pull out, though, from what you said, a couple of the strengths, I agree the location work is pretty good. And when they're on location, the work between Colin and Kate and Anthony Ainley, I think actually does step up a notch. Their interactions kind of go down a level and therefore are of a better quality. There's a bit more subtlety and a bit more humour in the way they're interacting without it being, hey, here's a gag and here's a witty retort. It's natural wit. It's natural dialogue between them. So that helps as well. This is also, I would argue, Perry's best story. Not necessarily Nick LeBrun's best performance, but Perry's best story in that she actually gets a whole plotline to herself that hinges on her and her capability and her knowledge.
Yeah, the botanical knowledge. Yeah, absolutely. But that dress she wears, Dave. Can we talk about the dress? It's horrible.
It is. Look. I'm not somebody who particularly, as you know, notices or cares much about the costumes the companions wear. But I do notice this one because it is hideous, yes.
And I know you don't get into the fashion too much, Dave, so that's why I thought I'd throw it in.
Yeah, no. This is one even I just look at and I go, oh my God, what have they done?
Yeah.
Which, look, at least she's not dressed in a leotard and short shorts again, which is, famously a gay man's idea of what straight men find sexy.
Yes.
But, yeah, look, at least Perry in this is a lot more than a peril monkey. She does have that moment where the Rani tricks her and everything, and you go, well, okay. She stands up to the Master, though. She outwits him. Mm-hmm. She does push the trolley in the wrong direction, which is... that scene can go either way depending on my mood. There are moods where I sit there and go, oh, for God's sake, this is terrible. And there are other ones where he's going, no, Perry, the other way. And I'm just going, this is hilarious. I don't care. It really depends on the mood I'm in.
Agreed. I'm just looking at my notes for this story, Dave. I don't particularly like this one at all. I don't really have that much to say on it. It's disappointing, because it's got Great location work, as we said. It's got George Stevenson in it. You know, that's great. It's got this new Time Lord we've never met before. There is so much potential, and it just doesn't live up to it. It's so disappointing.
No, it is, however, and I'll be maybe making a note of this when we get to the end of our run, it is a story in the season that perhaps feels least like the rest of the season. There actually isn't any moment of fan-condemned violence in this that needs to be excused. There isn't quite the same level of Perry just being abused, whether it's physically or sexually or emotionally in it. A lot of those themes and faults or strengths of other stories just aren't here. It is quite an odd little piece in this story, and I wonder if that's maybe why fans do have this one as their favourite, because it is very different from the rest.
Yeah, certainly for fans who aren't into the more gun stuff and the rest of the season. Yeah, that could actually be why they like this one, because there are many, many people I've heard and talked to who do like it. It's just not my cup of tea at all.
No, and look, that's why I'm giving it a 4 out of 10. If I'm saying 5's a pass mark, this is not way, way below that, but I have to say it is just below a pass.
I'm going to be a little kinder and give it a pass. I'll say 5.
So, Rob.
Yes.
We're giving you the Second Doctor and Jamie and Sontarans and location filming overseas. Why aren't you loving this? Actually, I'm kind of do love this one.
Do you really?
Love is probably too strong a word. I enjoy this one and I appreciate it for what it is. It is very easy to pick apart, but it has got the Second Doctor and Jamie. It's got that lovely black and white fade up to colour opening. It's got Jacqueline Pierce in it. Come on. Mm-hmm. It's got location filming. And okay, it's not the best location filming. In fact, of the 4 I think they did in the classic series, this is by far the weakest of them. I mean, this isn't City of Death. This isn't Amsterdam, which, look, for all the faults in Arc of Infinity, Amsterdam was well used. My God, it's certainly not Lanzarote, which was just fantastic.
Oh, yeah, that looks like a movie.
Yeah, but it is still overseas location filming. We're not filming in a quarry. We're not filming in the home shires of London or of the UK. It looks different, and that's a good thing. The characters, I think, are good. The actors, I think, are good. It doesn't hold quite as well together as it should. No. And maybe that's where I'll hand over to you, because you seem to be a little bit more down on this than I am.
Look, again, this one, I feel, and it's genuinely, to me, too long. I think it does go on for too long. But what I will say is I came to this was one of the ones, because I was watching this season piecemeal, I actually read the novel of this, I'm pretty sure, before I actually saw the episode.
The one Robert Holmes Target novel.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And I think it was the 100th Doctor Who novel. Didn't it have that on the cover?
It did, yes, yeah.
That's the one. And so, like a lot of Target novels, I think I come to the story forgiving a lot of things because I read the Target novel and that told the story in a way that I could imagine in my head, and in my head it was quite a wonderful thing. But then you actually see it on the screen and it's like, oh no. I mean, even the fact they've got Patrick Troughton with grey hair, as a young fan, even as an old fan now, I think, why? When you brought him back in 5 Doctors, you let him have the black hair. Look, I know he's becoming an older man, but gosh, he just looks so unlike his Doctor was.
Now, I believe that was Troughton's insistence, though.
Is that right?
I think so. You're not dyeing my hair. I think so.
And look, maybe I can applaud that on some levels. He doesn't want to be vain. He wants to, sort of age a bit. But it just doesn't match what we know of where this Doctor is at.
Yeah, I hear you.
And why does Jamie have that ridiculous... What do they call that thing where it connects to the kilt and goes up over the shoulder? And like, he never wore that on TV, and you put him in this really hot environment wearing his warmest costume yet. I don't get that at all. I used to sit there as a younger fan thinking, this is all silly. His hair should be black. Jamie should be wearing just a T-shirt or a jumper or something, not this huge, heavy thing. Gosh. They're the things I picked up on, Dave.
Yeah, having said though, Rob, what's your overall view of this one? How does it make you feel?
I think it's missed opportunities, because I don't mind Sontarans at all. And it's funny, Sontarans are like cybermen to me, the more stories of theirs I watch, the less I like the stories, but I'm into the race. It's the same as Cybermen. The more Cybermen stories I watch, I just get disappointed, but I actually like Cybermen very much. Here, the Sontarans are on the downward slope. You know, I think their first couple of outings with Tom Baker are very good. Their third outing with Tom Baker, I think they're going downhill. They're really going downhill here. And then by the time we get to the modern era and they're just children in suits, I'm just so disappointed with them. So on one hand, it excites me that there are Sontarans running about. And I think Shockeye and Chesini are great, interesting characters as well. But there's just something about it that just doesn't come off for me. And it's disappointing. And I wanted to love this as a kid, and I did love the novel, but when I saw the story, I thought, no, it just doesn't work for me somehow.
So I mostly like the Sontarans in this. I do like the characters. I like the dialogue between them. I like the way they interact with the other characters. I love that shot where you first see them, where you see the ships in space, and before the computer announcement even says what they are. As a fan, if you've seen the Time Warrior or Sontaran experience, you go, I know what that is. They're Sontarans. And then the moment where you just get the three-fingered hand with the wand that just comes up into frame to cover the Doctor.
Yeah.
I think that's all really well done. They are ridiculously too tall. It is incredibly clear that the masks have not been stapled to the necks of the costume, and you can actually see the edge of the mask a couple of times when Stike bends over, and you know, you can see down his neck. That's terribly done. But overall, I really quite like them, and I think Robert Holmes has given them a very similar sense of humour to what you do get from Lynx in the Time Warrior. I actually think it is a return to form in that sense. They just look wrong.
Okay, yeah, maybe it's the visuals that really takes me out of it, because when it comes to Sontaran stories, if you're drawing it as a graph, it just goes down, you know, from the Time Warrior onwards. And I wish it wasn't that way, because I do quite enjoy them as a race. I'm fascinated by them. I think they're really interesting.
Very.
I just can't get behind them in this.
Yeah, and that's fair enough. As I say, I enjoy the other characters. Chesini's really cool. I like Dastari and the way that he sort of, you know, he's allowed to reform as a character. But if I could pull on a bit of a thematic comment here, I said when we were talking about Attack, Rob, that I wanted to talk about the violence in a bit of a block, and I think here's the time to do it, because I've really been thinking about this as I've thought about this episode. As we go through, you're absolutely right in everything that you've said, and other fans have said before about Attack. Well, the Doctor does what he has to do to get out of the situation. The acid bath in Varos, the Doctor doesn't push them in, da-da-da-da. The violence in this one, yes, the Doctor's defending himself against Shockeye with only what he has. He's innovating the way the Doctor does, etc., etc., etc. Every one of the violent moments in this season, and there's others to come, I agree, are utterly excusable. However, if this was a police investigation, you would be saying that there is a pattern of behaviour whereby for every allegation, okay, you've got an alibi or an excuse or a justification for every one of them, but the fact that there is this pattern of excuses needed suggests to me that actually something is wrong. And I can't think of another season where we have to find these excuses again and again and again. And so I do think that actually, yes, individually, you could excuse every instance of violence in season 22. But the fact that we have to so frequently, I think actually is a problem.
Okay. I'm going to turn this towards the current series that we've just watched with Jodie Whittaker. And I don't want this to be a long conversation.
Yeah.
But in the Jodie Whittaker series, you know, we've not got a lot of violence. We've not got a lot of strong enemies. Not a lot of deaths in most of the stories. And we've looked at those and gone, well, God, that's boring. You know, is this entirely realistic? Shouldn't the Doctor have stronger, you know, adversaries? Isn't it more exciting when a Dalek appears and actually mows down tons of people, because that's what Daleks do? And I think, well, here we have the Doctor in a tough universe, having to deal with people who do want to kill him or, you know, do him harm for some reason. And I think, where's the balance? You know, if there were a few more stories in this season like Mark of the Rani, would that have balanced things out a bit? But when we've just looked at Mark of the Rani, we've said this is quite different to everything else, and we don't like it.
So let me say that the balance perhaps is that you can have the violence without the Doctor being continually the perpetrator. And if you look at the McCoy era, which is further into the 80s than this is, and let me say as an aside, I totally get this is a product of the 80s. Like, I get where this is coming from. It's not a complicated concept. Like, where did this violence come from? It came from the 80s. Everything else on television. But the McCoy era, which is further into that, gets away with it because it gives the violence to Ace. The Doctor doesn't blow up a Dalek with an anti-tank rocket. Ace does. Ace carries around Nitro 9. She's the one that's taking out Cybermen with gold coins. Okay, it's a bit silly, but you know, she's the one doing that. Whereas here, it's the Doctor that's taking life. It's the Doctor that's being violent, whilst the female companion is just being abused left, right, and centre. Once again, here she's just captured and almost chopped up by Cassini on many, many occasions. She's just here to be just treated badly. And I think that's the difference between the two eras.
Yeah, and is it because they're trying to do something different with the Doctor? You think of Peter Davison being sweet, sweet effete, and all of this. Are they just trying to make him tougher by blowing away Cybermen in the first story, or wrestling
absolutely.
with people and they fall into acid baths and things? They're just trying to make him more of a, not so much an action hero, but just a bit tougher somehow.
Absolutely. You can't have this pattern of behaviour that I'm claiming exists and not have it having been a very deliberate tonal decision by the production team. Now, there are people out there that might say, and I don't, I totally understand, that it is a perfectly good and welcome decision to make. I know fans that after watching the Davison era were like, yes, this is cool, more of this please. That's fine, it's a perfectly valid opinion to have. I'm just saying that it really does stand out in the history of Doctor Who, not just from what came before, but from what would come afterwards as well.
Yeah, I mean, roll back to the Tom Baker era, he's certainly not afraid to get into fights and wrestles with people or shoot guns either, but this seems to be taking that and amping it up a bit more than maybe is healthy.
Yes, it's being more direct about it, and it's being more frequent about it. And I agree, you can excuse every instance and justify and validate every instance in story terms and in tonal terms and everything. I'm not knocking that. I'm just saying you can't pretend, though, that there isn't a pattern that is far more frequent.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, look, the pattern is there. And when it comes to, and I guess we've just got to mention it briefly, at least the Doctor killing Shockeye with the cyanide. Shockeye has wounded him. Shockeye is chasing him. I remember when I was younger watching that, I felt quite scared by that scene. It was generally worrying. If someone chases you with a knife and they've already wounded you, that's kind of a scary thing. That's very visceral. That's not just being shot. That's a more personal sort of thing. Someone wanting to knife you.
Let me ask you, Rob, if Shockeye had got a lot more makeup on, green hair, or was a man in a rubber suit or something like that, would we blink twice at the Doctor killing him with cyanide? Or is it because he's basically a human with big warts?
Look, I think we would take it a bit better if he looked more alien, and that maybe says something about us.
Yeah, maybe, but certainly
us as people. I mean, not just you and me.
Yeah. No. I exactly. That's kind of the point I was getting towards. That if the Doctor gasses Sontarans or Silurians or Pteroleptals, well, of course he should, because they're the monsters. They're guys in rubber suits. A guy in just a rubber wart. Ooh, that's a little bit close to knuckle. He's basically a person. Now, he's clearly not. Like, Shockeye is clearly an alien in every way, shape, and form. Culturally, physically, he's clearly not a human. But he looks like one, and that doesn't sit right with us, I think. That is a problem.
Yeah, agreed. Should we give this a score, Dave, before we move on?
Go ahead, Rob.
It's a tough one, but I'm going to come in at 6 out of 10.
I'm going to come in at 7, on par with Attack of the Cybermen.
Okay, very fair. Next up, Timelash. And this is one that you got me to watch. I can't think of the exact episode. It's probably within the last dozen, maybe last half a dozen monthly episodes. You challenged me to watch Timelash and see what I thought of it, because I hadn't seen it for a while. And I said at the time, I was actually surprised by it. I thought it was better than I remembered. Still not a great story, but I particularly liked the way it took a historical figure and brought him in. And, conceptually, I thought it was good. It's not up there with Vengeance on Varos by any means, but it doesn't quite deserve the kicking it gets from fans. That's my opening gambit on this one.
I'm glad you said that, Rob, because I'm of a very similar opinion. Now, I'll just say, right at the top of this discussion about Timelash, Paul Darrow, love him. He is the man, and I will watch him do anything. And frankly, him just having a huge amount of fun at the expense of Colin Baker in this, I can watch that any day of the week. I'll just put that front and centre of the conversation. Beyond that,
yes,
I think this is a story really of two halves.
Yeah.
Part one, I actually think is pretty good. Its production values aren't great, although it's got some nice touches like the android and that sort of thing. And later when we see the Borad, his makeup. But this is another example of a world that kind of works. Like, we know how the power structure on this works. We know how oppressed they are. We know how the systems work. And, there are references to schools and hospitals. And there's actually a society out there beyond just the three rooms that we see, which is that Eric Saywood trademark that I spoke about. Mm-hmm. That's there. There are some good performances. There are some terrible ones. The Doctor sort of gets involved about halfway through, so this is another one where the Doctor is less involved, but I quite like part one of this story. I think it works. I think it's fun. Part two, I agree, does fall down. There's some couple of really cool ideas. They do have fun with time. I think the best thing about this is the stuff they do with the time crystals and all the rest of that and everything. I think that's quite clever. The Borat is good, but the moment when the script said that they go inside the Timelash to find all these crystals, someone should have just said, frankly, Eric Saywood should have said to the script editor, we can't afford that. Let's talk about what else we could do instead. That scene should not be in there. Perry being menaced, basically a convoluted plan that is meant to end in the forced rape and impregnation of Perry. I mean, that is the Borad's plan. The Borad's plan is to change it to something he finds attractive so he can rape her and get her pregnant. Like, that. Yep. That is the bad guy's plan. That is a problem. And that is a particular problem for this companion because it happens all the time. And then you get, all the stuff with the second ending where the second Borad comes out and just sort of gets talked off the edge of a cliff. You get all of that extra padding stuff, which, it's not a bad scene, but it stops the episode stone cold. Then the Doctor defeats the Bandrel's missile with a, I'll explain later.
That was the big one for me. That's still the sticking point for me.
Yeah.
That is cheap. That is terrible.
Yeah, that is as cheap as the Bandrel prop.
Even cheaper, I think, Dave.
Yeah.
But something that's not cheap is the Borad. That makeup, I'm going to say, is easily the best. No, I think of the Destroyer as well. It's one of the top two makeup jobs, prosthetics of the 80s era of Doctor Who. I think it's extraordinary, and it's a shame it's wasted in this story.
Oh, it is so good. It is one of those memories that has sat with me since I first saw it as a 6-year-old. And in fact, I can remember when we got the Target novel as a family, and the cover with the picture of the Borad, and me spending time sitting there, like, really pulling apart the human face and the Moroc's face, and just how the eyes are different levels, and the nose starts at one level and merges down to another level, and the mouth starts at one level and it merges and contorts into a Morak. Yeah, really, really cleverly done. Really, really good. There is some good stuff in here. There are some good performances in here. There's some fun performances in here. It ends up in a really bad place, though, and it's just a mess by the end of it.
Yeah, look, I think I've said all I want to say on this. Should we score?
Sure, I'm going to go for a 6. It is a pass. There's enough in this for me to call it a pass, but it is a notch or 2 or 3 below the other stories so far.
Okay, I'm sitting at 5.5.
Yeah, okay.
We haven't been too out of sync with each other on this.
No, that's interesting, isn't it?
No, it's good. Which
brings us to Revelation.
Yes, which I'm very excited to talk about because I'll just go out here and say it is my favourite story of the season.
Well, why don't you kick us off, Rob, with your reasons why?
Dave, this was another one. This was the second one this season when I saw it as a younger person that I didn't quite get what was going on. I found it very weird. I thought it was very unlike all the other Dalek stories I'd seen where Daleks just got around and shot everybody and, you know, they were very simple linear stories. I used to look at the character of the DJ and think, oh, this is just embarrassing. You know, I was a Young Ones fan, so I knew who Alexei Sayle was, and I just felt, no, Alexei Sayle can't be in Doctor Who, and why is this so weird? I really didn't like this story as a younger person. But as I got older, I saw it as just so quirky and weird and different. And we talk about Mark of the Rani being different to the other stories this season. I think this story is different too. Sure, it's got the violence and such, but just the way it is written, I think is wonderful. And, you know, people bag Eric Sayward, but you pull out Earthshock and you pull out this and you think, well, he can write quite well, and I know you particularly like The Visitation too. So it's it's interesting how much he gets bagged, even though he's written some good stuff for the show.
Yeah,
and this is I think his best story for the show. I don't think you'd agree with that, but I think it's his best.
No, I wouldn't agree with that. I'll say up front, I have a healthy and over the years growing respect for Revelation of the Daleks. I think it's a good piece of television. I personally don't enjoy it.
Okay.
So when I watch it at just that most gut, heart, level, am I enjoying this? The answer is generally no. Can I respect some of the performances? Absolutely. Can I respect the writing and what Sayward's writing? Very, very much so. And again, as a kid, went totally over my head. The older I get, this one, I totally, as you say, appreciate what he's doing. I appreciate the reference to Evelyn Waugh's work. I get all of that. Love it. But I'm not enjoying it. I like some of the set pieces. I've really learned to enjoy Alexei Sayle as the DJ. Again, used to think it was really stupid, but now I'm like, this is actually really clever. And the way that he's playing it is actually really clever as well. And when you can make me feel for Alexei Sayle being exterminated, job done. Well done. I give him points for that. I think Kara is a great character, played really well. I love her offsider. What was his name?
Was it Vogel?
Vogel, yes. I love Vogel. I love the way they interact. I love the moment where he's exterminated, and before he collapses, he just has this one moment where he just turns to her and just wants to take in her presence just for one more moment before he falls over and dies. I think there's stuff I like in here. I respect the direction. I respect the way that the production's been done, and J&T has clearly learned a long time coming lesson and not made the last story of the season the cheapie. He's made Timelash the cheapie, so Revelation of the Daleks can be a big event thing, and that's a really good decision. Well done, J&T. Lots and lots I respect here.
I'll just jump in and say, what about Sayward's clearly doing the Holmesian double act with, Jobel and Tassenbeeker and Orsini and Bostock. He's got everyone paired off. I think it's just great.
No, you see, they just don't work for me. I get what he's doing. I get what he's doing with Jobel and Tassenbeeker, but in the end, they're just two unpleasant characters I don't much care about, and I'm kind of relieved when they both get killed. It's kind of like watching the recent remake of A Star Is Born. They're just such horrible people that when eventually bad things happen to them, I just think they deserve it. I don't care. So, and frankly, it's the same with Orsini and Bostock. I mean, they're not nice people. They're hired assassins. They're hired killers. Yeah, Orsini gets a couple of cool lines and William Gaughan plays it really well, and he's a good get for the series. But do I care about them? No. Do I like them? Definitely not. And am I enjoying watching them go and be nasty to each other and other people? Not really.
Wow, that is interesting. Do you find there are many Doctor Who stories like that or is this a rare one where you can see what they're doing and you respect so much about it, like you've just been saying, and you like this and you like that, but you actually don't like watching it? Are there many stories like that for you, or does this stand out?
This really stands out in that respect. It really, really does.
Right. That's interesting. Yeah, just because the way you described that then, I didn't think I'd heard you describe a Doctor Who like that before.
No, it really, this stands in a very strange part of E-Space for me. Like, this just it doesn't even fit into my Doctor Who universe. It's like knocking on the outside saying, can I come in? And going, no, you're weird, go away. Huge respect for it. As I say, there's a lot I get, totally get. I'm just, at a deep level, I'm not enjoying watching it.
Okay. Well, before we score it, I just want to say I love the Imperial Dalek colour scheme as well, which was introduced here. I just think it's gorgeous.
Yeah, look, that is really good. The location filming is also really good. Can we have a quick conversation, though, and this is probably the last of the thematic conversations that I had down to have, which is, I've spoken a bit about other stories where the Doctor doesn't do a lot to solve the plot. In this one, he literally does nothing. The Doctor doesn't even arrive at Tranquil Repose until early in the second half of the story. He's still in the gardens by the end of part one of a two-parter. And what is it that resolves the situation at Tranquil Repose? It's Tarkus and Lilt get on the Skype and, go get the Black Daleks to come and take away Davros. Like, that's what resolves the problem. It's Orsini that blows up Davros's base and helps to take out Davros, and it's the Black Daleks that come and remove Davros and take everything away. If the Doctor hadn't turned up in this story, the only thing that would probably be different is the DJ probably wouldn't have been killed.
I know you're right on this. It's funny though, isn't it? And do we think this is because Eric Sayward just isn't enjoying writing for Colin, or he's just got his own story in mind and he just doesn't care that he's writing the Doctor out of it, essentially?
I certainly don't think that it's him deliberately sitting down going, I'm going to write a story without Colin, stuff him. I just think that he gets into this story and he's enjoying writing his characters so much that he's like, okay, I should probably get to the Doctor now. The Doctor and Perry walk through the wood some more. Right, back to my characters. The Doctor and Perry go over the wall. Right, back to my character. Like, I just think he's enjoying the other stuff so much, he doesn't bother with the Doctor.
I think you're right.
And that is a fault of the season. I mean, the show is called Doctor Who, and you can absolutely have stories where the Doctor is tangential to the plot, and that's a point, or as in the modern series, missing for an episode and let the companions have it. And in fact, as we said, one of the reasons why Mark of the Rani does work is the Doctor actually is removed from some of it, and Perry does step up and take control of that story, and that is the strongest part of Mark of the Rani in my view. And and if there'd been more for Perry to do, that would have been good. But we're removing the Doctor and removing Perry, and it's hard. How does Colin really make his mark in his opening season if at the end of the day the Doctor doesn't solve the problem?
Yeah, very fair point.
It's a point we raised about Jodie Whittaker a couple of times.
Yeah, exactly right. If you had to score it though, Dave, I'm fascinated to know what you'll give it.
I'm going to give it a 4. Actually, no, I'm going to give it a 4.99.
Oh, that's harsh.
Which is simply to say, I respect the work that it's done, but if I'm judging, as I say, if I'm calling 5 my pass mark, I cannot get it over that line, call it a pass, because I don't enjoy it. So I'll give it all the respect right up to the pass. I'll give it a 4.99, but it just doesn't work for me, sorry. But what are you going to give it, given it's your favourite?
8 out of 10 for me, just pipping Vengeance on Varos to be best of the season.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. This is the one where we diverge. Everything else was very close.
Yeah, and I'm not shocked by that as well. And it's been really interesting to hear your views on this and where we do diverge, because we agree on a lot.
Yeah.
We just don't agree on the sum of the parts.
No. But I think you are looking forward to the hardback of this coming out, aren't you?
I am. I'm really interested to see what Eric Sayward does with this. And I think as a novel, it's going to be a really cool book. I'm
wondering if he'll expand it in some way. Will he give the Doctor more to do? Who knows?
Yeah, I'm really genuinely interested to find out. I really am.
Because he's had decades of feedback now on it, or will he just be stubborn and just do a very linear, straight down the line, this is what happened on TV?
Given his previous work in books like Slipback and The Twin Dilemma, I don't think that'll be his instinct. I think he'll really go into strange and interesting places with both his books.
Oh, that excites me. That really excites me.
So, Rob, what have you learned from this dive into season 22?
This is the first time I've looked at it as a whole and watched many stories from it in the same week for a long, long time. And do you know, I think it's better than I have previously regarded it. At the same time, though, I see the faults and I see why the show was cancelled and then it was eventually just rested for 18 months. But I think they didn't learn any lessons there because they didn't actually change anything when it came back. So that was a huge missed opportunity. I actually think it was right to rest the show at the end of this. They had gone down some rabbit holes and hadn't quite got it right. It was time to step back, have a rest, but then come back with something different. Get Colin in a new outfit, get a new script editor, try something different. And I think Colin could have really, had a great second season and then a wonderful third season. He might have left then. He might have continued on. Who knows what could have been if they had actually shaken things up. So although I like this better than I remember, and although I think there are some great stories in it, I think it was right to be rested. I just don't think they learned their lesson and rested it correctly.
What fascinated me going through this is wondering why it is that season 12 works so well and is so well regarded, rightfully well regarded, and this isn't, because it's doing the same tricks.
Yes, it is.
It's the same selection of monsters. It's almost exactly the same selection of monsters. Dalek, Centauran, Cybermen, just add the Master. It's giving you Patrick Troughton back. It's giving you good location filming. It's doing a lot of things kind of that we expect the first season of a new Doctor to do. And as I say, it just feels as though it's a trick that's been used once too many times. And, it's like that comedian who has a routine and they keep doing it for 3, 4, 5 years and everybody loves it. And at some point people go, look, it's good, but I've seen it before. And I just think this one doesn't quite work. And it doesn't quite work, I think, because of a bit of the tone that goes over the top. It doesn't quite work because Nicola is just not working, her character is not well treated. And Nicola is a very good actress, but she's not such a good actress that she can overcome the sheer dirt that is being fed up to Perry in this season. Yeah.
And look, throw on top of that, Colin Baker in that outfit with his big personality, it's maddening because I do see how it can work and I do see moments I really like. But it's just, I can't take my eyes off him when he's in that coat, sometimes in a good way, sometimes in a bad way.
Do you know, not once during my rewatch did I notice the coat or care.
Is that right?
I just don't care. As I've said before, I get more annoyed about how bland Davison's costume is than how big Colin's costume is.
What about his persona, though? How it's really big. He should be on a stage, not a little television set.
There are moments when it works really, really well, and it's really funny, or it's really encouraging, or it's really interesting, and there are moments where it's cringeworthingly bad. I think that we see far, far less of that cringeworthy stuff in Trial of a Time Lord, and I think had he had a third season, he would have absolutely smashed it. Absolutely smashed it. In the way that Davo absolutely smashed it in his third series. Not that Davo was bad in the first or the second, but I think most fans agree Davo really nails it in his third season, and it's just going. Even Tom Baker, who's classic Tom from season 12, by the time you get to season 14, he is at another level as well.
Yeah.
Pertwee is at another level by his third season as well. Like, Doctors do improve over time.
Capaldi's third season, I'd wager, was his best.
Yeah, Capaldi's, absolutely. Doctors do improve over time. There is a clear trajectory of improvement in Colin's performance as he does try things and learn from what works and what doesn't work. It gets better, and that's all I can say. The problem is that when you're being loud, your mistakes do stand out.
Exactly. Very much so.
But I was pleasantly surprised by this season. I found a lot to respect in Revelation. I enjoyed Attack more than I thought I was going to. I enjoyed the two Doctors more than I thought I was going to. Mark the Rani went further down in my opinion. Varos, I did see some of the faults that maybe maybe time had erased or time had diminished. But there is a lot to like in this season. There's also a lot that doesn't work, and I think that's the one-line summary.
All right. Did it deserve to be axed at the end of the season?
Yes, I think it did, because it is looking like it's out of ideas and it's just doing Doctor Who for the sake of doing Doctor Who. And even the change to the 45-minute format, which we haven't touched upon, partly because I think it went out here in 25-minute parts, that really isn't made use of very well, really, until Revelation. And it's certainly with Attack of the Cybermen, you can clearly see that it's a 4-part story. Like, you can absolutely nail the moment that episode 1 was meant to end with a big reveal of the Cyber Leader. And
yes.
then, like the tone and the tempo of that story is a 4-parter that just happens to be a 2-parter. And it takes them a full season to get used to that. And just as they're getting used to that, they go back to 25 minutes.
It's a very odd era for Doctor Who, that's for sure.
So, look, maybe I'll rephrase. Would I axe Doctor Who now with the intention of, really being axed? Okay, no. Do I think that it utterly deserved a, right, before we sign off and give you another series, go away, stop what you're doing, think about what you're doing, think about why you're doing it, and what you want to do with your next season, and then we'll give you another go. As you said earlier, though, that didn't happen, but that's a story for another day.
It certainly is. That was a lot of fun, Dave. I really enjoyed talking about season 22.
I did as well. I'm really pleased the listeners nominated that. I'll be honest, this would not have been close to my top 5 list if we'd been working it out between us. And so having that outside influence from the listeners throwing this at us, really good surprise. And yeah, really pleased we did it. I would not have done this had we not been suggested to us.
Yeah, I think I would have ended up somewhere in the Pertwee era, probably.
Yeah, probably, yeah.